morning and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Anna Kalczyńska. While Europe's imposing new sanctions on Moscow, the US president insists that territorial concessions are necessary for a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. However, it will be Donald Trump and Donald Trump alone meeting Vladimir Putin face-to-face in glacial Alaska on August 15th. In a bid for advanced diplomacy, therefore, European leaders and the Ukrainian president will meet virtually with the US president tomorrow to communicate their common position and try to influence the situation. Will they succeed in talking Trump into a tougher stance toward Moscow, or has the deal been sealed already? To discuss the potential scenarios, I'm joined by Professor Scott Lucas, University College Dublin. Good morning, Professor, and thank you for joining us again.
Well, thanks to you and your viewers.
So the big question remains, how much can European leaders do at this point? Alea jacta est, and this meeting is primarily symbolic, or could it meaningfully influence Trump's negotiating position with Trump? I suggest we take a look at the wording of the statement following yesterday's snap meeting of foreign ministers. Let's take a look at it.
The people of Ukraine must have the freedom to decide their future. The path to peace in Ukraine cannot be decided without Ukraine. Meaningful negotiations can only take place in the context of a ceasefire or reduction of hostilities. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has wider implications for European and international security. We share the conviction that a diplomatic solution must protect Ukraine's and Europe's vital security interests. The European Union, in coordination with the US and other like-minded partners, will continue to provide political, financial, economic, humanitarian, military, and diplomatic support to Ukraine, as Ukraine is exercising its inherent right of self-defense. It will also continue to uphold and impose restrictive measures against the Russian Federation.
All EU member states signed the agreement, except Hungary, of course. So what's your take on it?
Well, we have been here before. If you think back to February, Russia immediately got the Trump administration into direct talks, including, for example, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and cut out Ukraine and the European leaders. Now, Europe and Ukraine responded over the following months by maintaining this line that you're hearing even today, which is no, for any type of resolution of Russia's invasion, Kiev and its European partners must be at the table. And if you think back to the spring, that line was successful in a number of fronts. One is that Europe, with the exception of, as you mentioned, a country such as Hungary, stayed united behind Ukraine. It took the initiative with Ukraine to say that a ceasefire is first and foremost needed, and then we'll discuss the issues to resolve the invasion. And perhaps most importantly, they got in touch with Trump administration officials, such as the Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, and they were able to get a measure of U.S. political support and now even military support for Ukraine's resistance. Think about the fact that whereas the Trump administration had cut military aid completely to Ukraine, now the U.S. is selling weapons to European partners who then transfer them to Kiev. So I think while Trump is unpredictable, while he's chaotic, while Prime Minister Tusk said, I think quite right, there are concerns as well as hopes for this meeting on Friday. This is not like Ukraine and Europe have no leverage, that they are just simply there waiting to be hit by whatever Putin and Trump say in Alaska.
All right. We know Europe is the biggest military sponsor of Ukraine right now, of its war effort. And it would want to be at the table, just as you said. But exactly with what plan? Does Europe has one single proposal to put on the table?
Oh, I think the immediate proposal is there. It has been there for months, and that is a 30-day ceasefire. You know, that you stop the attacks on the front line. Russia will continue to be in the areas it occupies, but there will be no attempt to advance. And you stop the attacks from the air, especially those that have been killing Ukraine civilians on a daily basis. Then when you get that ceasefire established, then you can get people around the table Russia, Ukraine, the US, the Europeans, and you can talk about the terms regarding territory, regarding economic measures, regarding security guarantees, especially for Kiev. Now, that proposal has been laid out for months, and we know exactly why it is not advanced, and that's because Russia does not want to negotiate. Let's be very clear here. Vladimir Putin is determined to conquer Ukraine, not only taking as much territory as he can get, but by making sure that Ukraine has no security guarantees, that it is demilitarized, and that it is a quote, neutral. In other words, a weakened country. So it's not that we don't have the proposals here, it's that the Kremlin is still pursuing a path of war rather than of peace.
Right, and apparently there's no other avenue going out of this situation. Now, if Trump signals willingness to accept this freeze of the conflict with no particular guarantees for Ukraine, how should European leaders respond? How might they respond?
Well, I mean, the first thing to realize is that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin cannot announce an agreement on Friday. Whatever Donald Trump comes up with, and he is chaotic, he is unpredictable. Remember, only a few days ago, he was talking about expanded sanctions on Russia and its trading partners. All Trump can say is, this is what I would like to happen. It does not mean that Ukraine agrees to this. And indeed, the Ukrainian constitution prohibits any type of giving away territory legally to another country. European partners do not have to accept this. The rest of the world, the international community, does not have to accept this. And indeed, even members of Trump's administration do not have to accept this. So you simply take note of what Trump and Putin say, and then you go back to work. You go back to work maintaining support for Ukraine's military, support for its economy, and support for its political position.
But the situation keeps on evolving, at least a bit. Territorial concessions keep on coming back on Trump's rhetoric, even though we know that this war is not about territory, but it's about subjugating Ukraine. We don't know whether Donald Trump really believes it's just about the land, or it's about selling the final result to its voters. However, lately, Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia could be allowed to retain some of the land it has taken. Do we know what exactly territories are we talking about, and what will be the other part of the story? I mean, how will Putin be pressured for this reward in land?
So let's say, first of all, that Ukraine cannot and will not legally give up any of its territory, and that includes Crimea, which has been, of course, occupied since 2014, to Russia. However, I think a landing point for a possible end to the invasion is that Ukraine and its European partners, its international partners, will accept in the short term Russia's occupation of the areas where it is now. And that includes almost all of Luhansk province in the east. It includes most of Donetsk in the east. It includes part of Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south. I think Ukraine and the European partners realize that you cannot militarily push Russia out at this point. We would have a situation, I think, comparable to Germany during the Cold War, whereas there had to be the acceptance that East Germany was in the Soviet orbit for about 40 years. But at the same time, West Germany built itself up economically, built itself up militarily and politically. So Ukraine is on a path to join the European Union. I don't think it would actually join NATO. I think you can't go that far with the Russians, but I think it would have effectively an association with NATO members, which includes military supplies, military planning, and a commitment to its defense if Russia should attack again. And Ukraine, I think, would have the political path that it is very much part of Europe, and that it is going to be a strong part of Europe with investment, with support of both its civilian and its military production.
Let's talk about security guarantees, because it's very important for both parties, apparently. For Russia, they mean neutralizing Ukraine. For Ukraine, real security guarantees from its allies. Isn't it like an unresolvable contradiction?
Well, a lot of people will talk about, Ukrainians, my friends, will talk about luck. Ukraine had security guarantees that were not fulfilled in the past. And they'll talk, for example, going all the way back to the Budapest Memorandum. So it's not just a question of saying, we guarantee Ukraine security. What are the measures that you put in place to do this? I think you have to have a commitment by first European countries and then others, which is that you will defend Ukrainian facilities. There has been a vast increase in Ukraine's defense production, especially in the west of the country, and especially in technology such as drone technology. I think not only do you have guarantees that you protect those areas, I think you have European investment in those facilities, and you even have European forces who are there to protect those facilities. I think you have a commitment which is reinforced in terms of joint planning between the militaries of countries, between the intelligence services of the countries, and you present this to the Russians, that even though Ukraine may not be in NATO, it in effect is being treated as an associate of NATO, which enjoys that right to collective defense. That's the security guarantee that I think you look for. And if Vladimir Putin objects, I don't think you back down from this. I think that's the mistake that was made before 2022, that there was not a clear-cut guarantee for Ukraine to push back what became Russia's full-scale invasion.
Let me just quote the latest report by Volodymyr Zelensky, who says that there's no sign whatsoever that the Russians have received signals to prepare for a post-war situation. None so far. On the contrary, they're moving their troops and forces in such a way as to start new offensive operations. So if this report is true, then what's next?
Oh, I mean, Zelensky is just being very practical here in saying, do not expect Vladimir Putin to go to this meeting on Friday and agree to a ceasefire. And he's right. The Russians will not do it. And he's saying at the same time that when Russia does not agree to a ceasefire, do not expect them to pause their operations. Expect them to try to ramp up their operations both on the ground and from the air. Because what we haven't discussed, but what's behind this is that the Russian economy has some serious issues. They cannot maintain the deployment of forces at the same level they have for about the past 41 and a half months. Vladimir Putin has maybe a 6 to 12 month window to try to break Ukraine on the military front, and therefore it is essential to recognize that Russia will not stop these operations, but probably escalate them, and to escalate the defense of Ukraine in response.
Well, Wednesday will mark an important meeting between European leaders and U.S. President Donald Trump ahead of the Friday meeting in Alaska with Vladimir Putin. Thank you so much, Professor Scott Lucas, for joining us on TVP World. We will be hearing soon, and let's hope for the best to come. Thank you once again for being with us.
Thanks to you and your great viewers.
And thank you for joining us here on TVP World for World Talks. Stay tuned for the latest comments and other important news to come.